Saturday night, Lee Wood and Josh Warrington produced the goods. In fact, DAZN produced the goods. It was a brilliant night, brilliant card, brilliant production. Lucky enough to be there ringside, and it was absolutely amazing. The big fight lived up to its billing. Everyone thought that the two styles would gel, and we'd be in for a treat, and a treat we certainly got. First thing to say is I thought Josh Warrington was outstanding. The guy, in my opinion, has been a little bit below par. Not necessarily massively below par, but I don't think he's found the same levels in his last few fights against Lopez and Lara as he did back in what I consider to be his heyday. So the likes of Carl Frampton, Lee Selby, at that time Josh Warrington was thereabouts the best featherweight in the world. And I felt like he was on the slide. I felt like a lot of people before the fight that this wasn't going to be the best version of Warrington. But what transpired on Saturday night proved that he has still got it. He's still got it in spades, and he's still one of the very best featherweights in the world and would be a match for anyone. He gave Lee Wood fits in probably the rounds between 3 and 6, even parts of round 7. His punch output, as per normal, whenever he's had his best days, he's always been someone to throw a very high volume of shots, create angles to throw a lot of shots. He's very good at short arm shots and bent arm shots up close and in the pocket. And his pressure was incredible. He was relentless. He did throw in the head a little bit. He did land low, apparently, according to Barry Jones, who was commentating for DAZN, and from the angle he could see, he saw quite a few low shots. He's not the kind of guy who would say that without there being some validity behind that, so I've got no reason to disbelieve him. I could see some of them were sort of borderline, but he had a better view as he was commentating. And obviously, he landed a few around the back of the head. Whether that was because Lee Wood was turning his head or not, again, it might come down to whose camp you're in. But Josh Warrington, I don't think he deserves too much criticism for his fighting style. It is what it is. He's just seeking to gain an advantage. It's just the way he fights, and it's the referee's job to manage and control that. By the same token, I don't think the Warrington camp can have any massive complaints about having a point taken off, because it's his rugged style. It's the way it is, and you roll with the punches, and you make your bed, you got to lie in it. But it wasn't just the high volume and the flurries of punches and the all action kind of pressure. I also thought in rounds certainly 4, 5 that his jab stopped Lee Wood from adjusting and getting and regaining any momentum. I thought his jab at sort of mid range was really, really strong. I didn't expect that, and that ultimately improved his capability to keep Lee Wood at range, to stop Lee Wood from starting to assert himself. So it wasn't just about his short range flurries. His mid range work was really good, and his jab was a lot better and a lot more effective than I expected it to be. Lee Wood was, it wasn't his best performance. He was obviously a little bit tight at the weight, but he didn't make any excuses. He gets in there like a man, the man that he is, and he found a way. I thought he started quite well. Started with a clear game plan, switching, and whenever I thought he was in southpaw, Josh Warrington seemed to find it a little bit harder to gain the upper hand. It was only when Wood started to be really put under severe pressure that he then got to the point where he ended up going back to orthodox, to his natural stance, just because he probably felt under fire and was struggling to deal with it. I think Ben Davison said after the fight in one of his interviews that when he's in southpaw stance, he's pretty good going forward, but he's maybe not so good receiving fire and defensively. So I thought Lee Wood, his performance overall was probably a 6 or 7 out of 10 by his standards in terms of how he applied himself in the fight. But Lee Wood's a 12-round fighter. We all know that now. We all know the size of his bollocks. We all know how deep he can dig. And I don't actually think he had to dig as deep on Saturday as he did against Conlon. I felt against Conlon he was knocked down so heavily with that getting squared up and that backhand full force of everything, every bit of leverage that Conlon could sum up. I think he landed in that first round knockdown. And I felt he walked around concussed for 3 or 4 rounds and took until about round 5 in that fight to get his feet back. A little bit like Froch did against Groves. But his powers of recovery, he's up there with, you know, the Tyson Furies and Froches of this world in terms of his ability to just fight all night, because he'll find a way to stay in a fight. His survival instinct is unbelievable, but his instinct also to retaliate and to go back and put it on his opponent even when he's hurt and under fire is just unbelievable. I do think in the exchanges Warrington was much better, and I think the deliberate plans that Ben Davison and the coaching team that he's got set, they're great, but ultimately you've still got to be able to fight. Like Ryan Walsh said earlier this week, at some stage a fight's going to break out, and when a fight did break out, Josh Warrington was the handier lad, and that's where probably Lee Wood struggles a little bit in exchanges like that. But I believe Ben Davison and Lee Wood are a match made in heaven. I really feel like the way that Ben Davison and the team go about their work, the work that Lee Wiley does in terms of analysing the opponents, working out game plans, having plans on top of plans. So if this happens, then you do this. If this happens, you do that. If this goes wrong, then you can always go to this. It feels to me like Lee Wood is so well briefed and so in control of what needs to happen in there to deal with any scenario that's thrown at him, that he is just he's a happy fighter, and a happy fighter is a dangerous fighter. And I think that is what Ben Davison has done for him and helped take him from a domestic fighter to a world champion and probably the best featherweight in the world. Amazing. I don't know any neutrals out there that don't like Lee Wood. He's an unbelievable. In fact, I know very few people at all who don't like him. Obviously, there would have been 5,000 Leeds fans in there on Saturday night who obviously were willing their man on. But Lee Wood carries himself before, during and after fights with absolute class. Massively respectful guy, tough as old boots, old school fighter who'll take on anyone, backs himself, but he never goes too far with the talk. He's always respectful. He just seems to be the kind of guy that you want to be in his corner. So credit to Lee Wood. That finish was just outstanding. 7 punches, 6 of them landed right on the button, adjusted when Josh Warrington fell into him, moved his feet back, had the presence of mind, despite having been under so much heavy fire the previous 4 rounds, to just execute. That was one of the best finishes I've seen, to be honest. And then when we talk about the finish, we have to talk about the referee's decision to call the fight off. For me, again, this is subjective. If you're in Warrington's camp or you've got any bias towards Josh Warrington, you're going to be turning around and saying that fight should have continued. He should have been given the minute, just as Conlon in the Conlon fight, Wood was given the minute when I felt he was hurt even worse than Warrington was on Saturday night. My view on that, however, would be it doesn't make any difference to the outcome of the fight. Lee Wood wins that fight as soon as he's landed that 7-punch combo and stuck Warrington on the floor very, very heavy and staggering him all over the place. I think that's him done. And I don't mean that Warrington hasn't got good powers of recovery. I mean, it was just that heavy and he was staggering that much in the early part of the moments that followed. And that Lee Wood is not going anywhere. He will just keep on coming forward until he nails you to the canvas. And that's an inevitability. That's just the way he fights. Just the same as Carl Froch was. He will just keep coming, and 15 minutes is a long time. I just don't see Josh Warrington would have survived another 15 minutes of Lee Wood coming forward. Could be wrong. That's just my opinion. So do I think it was the right decision? I don't even want to say, to be honest, because I just think it depends on what your view is. What is good for the whole boxing world is that it leaves a narrative that sets up a rematch, and a rematch that could bring another 5,000-10,000 on each side of the divide into a football stadium and create a British super fight. And I think Josh Warrington deserves to be in a super fight after that performance on Saturday night. I've got nothing but respect and love for that performance and the way he handled himself as well. I understand he's disappointed. I don't agree with everything that came out of his mouth, his dad's mouth, his camp's mouth, his supporters' mouths since then, but I'm not biased towards Lee Wood either. If there was an appeal and they felt like actually Michael Alexander should have given him the chance to see out that, and someone mandates that he gets a rematch, I don't have a massive problem with that either. I don't think it's a bad thing. Lee Wood deserves his credit though, because that finish was unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. So great night of boxing. Shout out to Nico Leivars, who stepped up to 8 rounds against Ryan Walker. Ryan Walker's been in with the likes of Lee McGregor and Paul Butler, ex-world champion. So Nico going into that fight, it was a definite step up in his 5th or 6th fight. Ryan Walker definitely made it a tough fight, used all the dark arts, used his head a little bit, he knew exactly how to gain an advantage, using the dark arts in there. But Nico weathered anything that was thrown at him in that respect. Probably won 7, or he did win 7 out of the 8 rounds, but on the scorecards, and I had it exactly the same. I thought he only lost 1 of the 8, and he finished super strong and super controlled. Like boxed really well in that 8th round, when you would think a young prospect is going to start to tire and start to struggle a little bit, start to lose his shape. And I thought he was very composed and managed that really well, and showed a lot of maturity. So onwards and upwards for Nico. But what an amazing night of boxing. It had absolutely everything, and it's why we love the sport.